Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And thanks for joining me and Michelle, who will be joining in just a moment. Number 25, reading her poem, which is wonderful. And I don't know if you all saw the graphic, but she sent me a picture of herself as a kid, like the time in which she's reflecting on in this poem. And it's a great picture. And it was fun because I got to include it in the graphic. And I think I'm going to be doing more of that because it's fun to see people's. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
How are
I'm
you?
good. How are you?
I'm
Can you
good.
hear me? Can
Yep,
you hear me okay? Yeah.
yep.
Great.
I was just talking about how you sent me a childhood photo and how fun it was and how much I loved it. And I'm excited to see more. And then I reached out to people who are going to be coming on in the future and saying, hey, if you want to send me a childhood pic. And it's been so, I love them. So
Great.
thank you for
Yay.
doing that.
No
Yeah.
worries. It was, meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is so fun. I don't know why I think because when I started it was like, what am I doing? And we're coming for the people that we know, and it's like, oh, I don't want to I didn't even think of doing childhood pictures. So anyway, thanks for your brilliance.
No problem. Yeah, I always use the same
Hmm.
photo, right? And so, I like look around and I'm like, maybe this one really goes with what I wrote. And so, yeah, glad it worked out.
Yeah. And it's fun to see. I think for me anyway, I love it when memoirs include photos because
Hmm.
I like to, because it's interesting what people look like as opposed to how they describe themselves.
Yeah, it's true.
So I
Yeah.
really, and this is like a tiny piece of memoir.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's fun to see. So, anything else you'd like to share before you begin?
No, I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to do this. I know I had mentioned this before, but I haven't written poetry in probably like 10 years. And so it was a really fun exercise to have this prompt and like really kind of push you there. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a wonderful experience. So I'm
Oh,
really
I'm so glad.
grateful.
I'm happy to finally meet you, although
I
I
know.
feel like I know
I
you.
feel like I've
So
already met you, especially since I heard your podcast, right? The
same.
Replay podcast of
Yeah.
Marina, which we both participated in. And
Hmm.
so I feel like we've already had a conversation, but we actually never have. So this is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, and also seeing your and Ronit's pictures in Philly, I was like, oh, I want to be there, eating that and doing that.
Yeah.
So I was living vicariously. Maybe Seattle next year. One never
Yeah.
knows.
Next year. Yep.
Hmm. So anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you. That's the joy of this whole series is I get to meet all these people who I feel like I know,
Uh-huh.
but we've never actually had a conversation. Many of
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
okay, anytime you're ready.
All right. Cool. Sweet potato noodles. I am from sweet potato noodles, from shin ramyeon, barley tea, and jjajangmyeon. I'm from the apartment atop a Korean bathhouse, boisterous, chained, with bees buzzing between bristly bricks. I'm from the forbidden mango my popo sneaks me. The pulpy fibers cling between my baby teeth. I am from incensed family shrines and stocky 6-foot northerner frames. From Ye Ye Popo, Lao Ye Lao Lao. I'm from sacrifice, from the left behind. I'm from girls don't fart and never talk back. I'm from my grandmother's temples, the suburban churches where I never belonged. I'm Chinese from Korea, forever from the in-between. A Yankee Doodle writing on a red dragon. From war, famine, and gluttony, I rose, nourished by kimbap, potato soup, kimchi, and McDonald's fries. I am from Yeya's wild pigeons, which he fed nonstop in his dementia, until the sidewalks crunched with our family's noodles.
Thank you. I feel like after listening to your podcast, I also have more insight into some of this. So but what was your experience of you already shared a little bit, but what was your experience of writing it and choosing what part of like your life to write about, or like was there a choice you made, or did it just come this way?
Yeah, I mean, it really just kind of came, and I guess, I could have chosen different aspects of my life, right? I
Mm-hmm.
immigrated when I was 9, and so I could have chosen, there's probably more, plenty that I could have drawn from after 9. And I have some of it in here,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like most of it, when I really think about those formative years of what I'm from, I think back to living in that bathhouse,
Mm-hmm.
living. And before that, I lived in a noodle factory, and that's what this is about, when the
Mm-hmm.
noodles that
Mm-hmm.
crunch, because the first place that I lived as a baby after I was born was a noodle factory,
Mm-hmm.
and it was my family's noodle factory. And factory I use, loosely.
Right.
It's like,
Right. It's not a huge,
they
yeah.
make noodles, yeah. And yeah, so like I really feel like that is part of um, what formed me, what shaped me,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very easy to go from there. And Yeye Popo Laya Lala are all my terms for my grandparents.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's, I think, where I draw. I mean, obviously, the heritage piece from feels a lot more alive there,
Mm-hmm.
especially as they have all passed a long time ago.
Yeah.
So like, it's the part that I want to keep alive as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Were you able to go? I only think of this because I was hanging out with my friend yesterday who is Chinese, and we were talking about her going back to Hong Kong for her Popo's funeral. Were you able to
Yeah.
be with them for that?
So my Yeye's funeral, I was still in Korea actually. When
Mm-hmm.
he passed, he was the oldest. And then when my Popo died, I was in Phoenix, and
Mm-hmm.
I was still a kid, and my parents couldn't get away. Like, we were running a restaurant, and so
Yep.
no, we didn't get to do that. And I remember at our little apartment, my dad crying and making us
Mm-hmm.
bow in our, like, because we couldn't be there, but that we had our own little, mourning moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then and one of my life's regrets is actually not flying back when my maternal grandmother, my Lala, passed, because we were
Mm-hmm.
very close as well. I was very close to um, my yaya. I never knew, because he's the one who had Alzheimer's and dementia, and
Right.
so by the time I was born, like I don't feel like I could really know him. But the other three grandparents I was really close to,
Mm-hmm.
and when my Lala passed, I had just graduated from business school, and I just started my job. I was like
Mm-hmm.
a week or two into my job, and I really wanted to go, and I would have gone, but my parents kind of urged me not to, because she had already passed. It's not like
Yeah.
I could say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as a young adult starting out, like,
Mm-hmm.
I decided, yeah, I mean, there is a lot. It's a daunting process to think, but now thinking back, and it has informed how I make my choices
Mm-hmm.
uh, now on. Like, when I have
Mm-hmm.
opportunities like that, I go.
Mm-hmm.
I drop everything and go, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'll ever regret going, but you
Yeah.
might regret not going. And so yeah,
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also I mean, she was gone, but it's reconnecting with all like the extended family. It
yeah,
seems like, especially when you're an immigrant, at least from what I've been
yeah,
told, it's the reconnection with the people who have stayed.
yeah. It would have
Um,
absolutely been that, and I
yeah,
really mourned the loss of that opportunity. Yeah,
yeah.
but I did go back. A few years ago with my son.
Oh,
My
that's
son,
wonderful.
and
Hmm.
he had just turned 5 then, and it was his first time in Asia.
Hmm.
It was first time me taking my husband there, and I showed them, the apartments that
Hmm.
I lived in after the bathhouse, and the Chinese school in the because I lived in the Chinatown in
Hmm.
Korea, in Incheon, and to like show them my old haunts, and it was
Hmm.
just a real like nostalgic trippy experience, to be there and reconnect with family. So yeah, I'm grateful that I was able to have that experience.
Yeah, I really felt the strong sense of place. Like I felt the nostalgia in your piece of
Mm-hmm.
like part of it is your use of Chinese, but also just like the um I felt and the food
Mm-hmm.
and the like, and it does feel like um very different from where we are. right?
Yeah.
Like even a Chinatown within a city here, it feels it has a different sense of place to
Well,
me.
yeah, and it's Koreanized Chinese Chinatown too.
Okay.
So it's,
Yeah.
that's like a whole, the in between that I talk about, which is
Yeah.
really, yeah, really interesting. And it is surreal. And that how Korean culture is so trendy right now.
Yes.
From the
Yes.
bathhouses to
Yeah.
shinramen, like a lot of these
Yeah.
things people know about. And
Kimchi, like kimchi, it's like, oh, I love kimchi,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
and like even after, up until the last few years, like I would never dreamed of that really happening,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so it's real bizarre. And yeah, I'm grateful that I have these memories in my mind. Like my uncle took me back to the bathhouse, even though so now it's a grocery store,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
one of my aunts still lives on top in the apartment above. And yeah, it's just really gave me this was, like, I think, well timed for us to do this, because
Oh,
next
good.
month is Asian American Heritage, Pacific
Mhm.
American Heritage Month. And it's Mother's Day,
Mhm.
is next month. And it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So there's
Right.
just a
That's
lot
a
to
big month
reflect
for you,
on. Yeah, it's
Michelle.
a big month. It's my busiest month, actually.
Yeah. Are you writing a lot of essays now? Because I could already imagine you reflecting on these things and the intersection of these things. That's what I appreciate so much about your writing is the intersection of all these elements. And I feel like you're talking about the in between, and I feel that a lot in your writing. And I'm always really drawn to that. I don't know if it's because people assume I'm a certain way because of how I look or how I was raised, and I never felt like I was that. And so I feel a sort of affinity with that. But I really, I appreciate and try to encourage my friends who also have these different intersections to write, because I feel like it's so vital to see the whole picture of people. And you do such a great job with your advocacy and your writing
Thank
about
you. I
talking
appreciate
about those things. Yeah,
appreciate it. Yeah.
I I've like from the minute I became aware of you, I was just really drawn to your writing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, but I had another thought and I've forgotten. But oh, so the bathhouse, was that like what we think of as a Korean spa? Like with like,
But it wasn't a spa. So
okay,
now, because of the dramas and all that, like
yes,
it's like, now it's
yeah,
starting to become more of like a luxury experience.
yeah,
But if you think about it, back in the day, like my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, they didn't have running water in their house,
oh, okay,
and
hmm
my paternal grandparents did, because they owned this bathhouse, which is where the neighborhood,
hmm
they would come and take a bath. They pay $1.
okay,
Essentially, it's 1,000
hmm
won, and they go, and there's a separate women's area and men's
hmm
area, and that's where they bathe.
hmm
And so it's a place of necessity,
okay,
right? And then the business model had to pivot as everybody got,
got water.
like, because I mean, Korea, 1950 is not that long ago. That was when the country was like
Right,
devastated by the
right,
Korean War, right? And my parents
hmm
were born just after the Korean War. And with my grandparents, they were hoarders, because they
right,
lived through when they had absolutely nothing. And so and my parents still have hoarding tendencies, and I
yeah,
have hoarding tendencies that I'm trying to,
hmm
move past. And because you inherit those things. That's the generational trauma, right? Of like,
for
what
sure.
if I need this one day and I won't have it,
Hmm
and so yeah, it's really interesting. Korea has obviously been uh, through tremendous growth, right? In
Yeah.
the since the war. And
hmm
it's really amazing to me what Korea as a country has accomplished. And for me, as a Chinese person who was born in Korea, who, I'm like, how much of it am I allowed to claim, is something I always struggle
mm
with and wrestle
Yeah,
with in my writing as well.
yeah.
Because, like my grandfather was, uh, he left China because of famine, northern China
Mm-hmm.
because of famine. And he was illiterate, had no money at all. He was like a teenager when he left. And he was a self made entrepreneur once he got to Korea. But then he lived through like the Korean War and the Japanese occupation,
Yeah.
while in Korea. And even though he built up, like he started, my dad tells stories of like he sold soybeans, he grew soybeans and sold them, and then he started selling tofu, and then he sold soybean oil, and then it just like grew on top of one another,
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was born, my dad was the youngest. By the time I was born, like he had a factory and a bathhouse, like so
Mm-hmm.
pretty big businesses. But during the war, a lot of his land and property was seized
Yeah.
by the government because he's
Yeah.
Chinese, he's not Korean, and we had to go to like I never had Korean citizenship, even though I was born in Korea and my
Mm.
parents were born in Korea. Birthright citizenship, it's a New World idea, it's a U.S.
Right.
idea, right? Like it's not a thing that exists in other countries, and
So you had Chinese citizenship?
I had Taiwanese citizenship.
Taiwanese.
My
Okay.
parents met in Taiwan,
Mhm.
which is the Republic of China, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's like a really wrought.
Yeah.
It's complicated because
Yeah.
my family was kind of like they were forced to pay bribes, they were
Sure.
abused by the system, by the Korean system. Yet there's tremendous love, right? Like we eat kimchi with every meal, we watch the Korean dramas, we spoke Korean on the playground, even though
Mm-hmm.
like at school we were supposed to study Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
at the Chinese school because we weren't allowed to go to the Korean schools, and so there's all this wrestling.
Yeah. And also that Korea was going through like they were the oppressors, but they were also being oppressed, so there's all these different layers of, I mean,
Yeah.
like it's not just binary. Like
It's
they're the
not,
bad
yeah,
guys
but
or the
the
good
the
guys or,
displaced Chinese in Korea then yeah is in a weird caught in between place, right? Because we're not
yeah.
connected to mainland China at all, which was
No.
closed off to me. I
Right.
never
Oh,
even
I'm not calling
yeah,
China the oppressor in this situation. I'm calling the Americans the oppressor, or
yes,
the
the
Japanese the
Americans, yeah,
oppressor.
yeah,
Oppressor. Yeah.
yeah,
In this situation.
and that's another layer because as somebody who
Yeah.
immigrated to America, and I
Hmm.
actually went to do an internship at the U.S. Embassy when
Hmm.
I was in college, and so I lived on the U.S. military base,
Oh wow.
and so it was really interesting to have my family visit me, and I'm like living on the U.S. base, and
Hmm.
like of course, my family who lives in the States, because which I have, a considerable amount of family who have
Hmm.
immigrated because we are part of the diaspora no matter where we are,
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
people are always kind of like moving around trying to find where they can fit in best.
Yeah.
And so, my family who is in Korea and in Taiwan is going to have a different attitude, obviously, about
Yeah.
America than
Yeah.
those of us who are here, in the
Hmm.
States. And it was such an interesting experience living on the U.S. commissary grounds where it was like you walk in and it's like 1950s. There's like
Hmm.
wild pheasants and
Hmm.
cinder block houses and lawns,
Wow.
and it looks like 1950s America.
Hmm.
But all around the commissary is like a roaring city of
Hmm.
Seoul, right? And there's like a
Hmm.
lot of discussion happening where about like which land should go back to South Korea,
Right.
and
Hmm.
because it's a lot of like prime real estate that the U.S.
Yep.
military is taking up right now,
Hmm.
and yeah.
And for what at this point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that for me, I reflect on the Russian war in Ukraine,
Hmm.
and like it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, for what? I mean, but the threat doesn't go away. North
Right.
Korea is still there.
I guess that there is that
Like,
truth. It feels like South Korea is, because I think of their cultural influence and how they feel so like present everywhere in music and movies and all this stuff. Like, oh, they seem secure in their space. But I guess it's true. North Korea doesn't really
still
make one doesn't really make one feel secure. It's like
yeah.
not only are they still there, but they're really unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
too.
Yep. They're still tunneling.
Right.
Tunnels to South Korea. I've toured one of those tunnels
Really.
at the DMZ. Yeah,
Oh
it's
wow.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much there to know between China, Korea, Japan. Like, and I feel like I know this much. It's one of those things where you learn this much and you realize there's
Yeah.
this much. But
And absolutely, and I don't know, I know this too, right? Like, there's no way. And I have an international studies undergrad degree, but like
mhm,
that, that's dated now. And it's like,
yeah,
how much can you really know when, especially a lot of these governments are secretive, so they're by
yeah.
design, you're not supposed to know.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if it sort of relates to the whole, well, because we both read Tastes Like War, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was such
Yeah.
a brilliant book about intergenerational trauma and
And the effect.
food.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, actually, I love that book. I'm
Yeah.
including that book in a roundup I'm writing.
Yeah.
Grace Cho, awesome. I got to meet her at
Yes. I
AWP.
saw that.
Yeah, yeah, amazing, amazing. But it
Hmm.
is, again, the difference in perspective from if you were in Korea and lived, and she was born and raised in Chehalis, Washington,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so
Yeah.
I spent the considerable time in Seattle, but as someone who was born in Korea, who lived in Incheon, which is where MacArthur landed,
Wow.
and he, I feel like, everybody just writes their own truth, right? And I absolutely admire and love that book and celebrate Grace Cho for writing her truth.
Hmm.
And she is someone much more brilliant than me. She's, like a professor, she's a scholar, but like, I think the picture that she painted, the little bit that kind of is left out is, what if MacArthur hadn't landed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hadn't, it's like, yes, there were bad things that happened as a result of the U.S. military presence, but if the U.S. military hadn't intervened, because we're talking intervention now, so it's very topical to, we currently have a huge war going on,
Hmm.
then what would have happened? If North Korea would have taken over South Korea, if China
Hmm.
would have, like, because China, yeah, like, yes, there was bad stuff that happened with the U.S. military there, but bad stuff would have also happened if the
Right.
U.S. military never intervened, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Bad stuff was happening. Bad
Yeah,
stuff is still happening. I mean, that's an important thing to
yeah, to
acknowledge. Yeah. And
acknowledge.
it's
Yeah,
good for me to hear because I'm just like, go the US military. I'm quick to feel like we've
yeah.
overstepped our boundaries and what boundaries we've
But there,
overstepped,
I lived in the shadow of this park that was commemorating General MacArthur because he
Hmm.
saved our city, and so I
Yeah.
think when you grow up in that, like,
Hmm.
it's like, well, yeah, like, this wouldn't be here if the military didn't intervene. And yeah, there's the attitudes change over time, right, with
For
needs.
sure.
And like you said, it's like, yeah, do we need, do this, does South Korea still need U.S. military
Hmm.
presence? Depends on what North Korea does, like,
Right.
we just never know, like,
No,
yeah, depends on
that's
what
their
China
move.
does, like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm. That's their move. We don't know.
yeah, we don't
You
know.
know. Yeah. It's complicated. So it's complicated. I think
Yeah,
we can agree it's complicated. And thank you for sharing your insight. I once people get on here, I want to just keep talking because I
yeah,
really am enjoying meeting people that and I do want to really talk up Michelle for anyone who has not read her work. And I look forward to reading your memoir because I know it's going to be brilliant.
thank you so much.
And I'm just so excited for you. So if you
Fingers
haven't,
crossed.
it's
I'm
going
on
to be great.
ascension.
I know.
Somebody
I
please pick
can't.
it up.
I'm not there, and it's so stressful. But I feel like you have. I feel like everyone has a unique point of view, but I feel like your point of view is underrepresented. So I feel like someone
Very
should.
specific point
Yeah.
of view, but it's
Yeah.
also universal, right? Like,
Right.
everything is universal. Human
Right.
experience is universal.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of being able to tell our stories is, it brings us closer together, because when you realize when somebody
I
has
agree.
such a specific experience different from you, yet you still can relate so much to it, then we can embrace our humanity together, right?
I agree. That's the goal. And I've really, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Michelle has bipolar, and I have a couple of friends who share on social media who do as well. And And I applaud them because because beginning these conversations is what lifts the stigma. Because we can all kind of talk in like vague, like there's no stigma on mental health, like that's fine, but that's not how people's minds work,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Like they need to be like, oh, I know you,
Mm-hmm.
and I've just really appreciated those frank conversations from you and my friends.
And thank you for listening. And thank you for, being you. You're just like the biggest supporter. I was like, who
Oh,
is this Alyson person who's like always so supportive and warm? I just see you do that for so many other writers. You're
oh,
such a good citizen of the writing community.
oh,
Really,
thank
really,
you.
really appreciate you.
You're
Yeah.
gonna make me cry. So thank you. I think it is partially because I have these two friends who I'm always encouraging to write larger
Mm-hmm.
about their experiences. Because one
Yes.
is a Black woman, and I feel like she really is underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's not her job either to educate people. Like she's doing enough, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I see so much of them in your stories, and I just feel like there's not enough of people saying, wow, we share this thing and there's no shame.
Yeah.
And the more that we do that for each other, the better the world is, right?
Yeah.
What's
Yep.
the point
Well,
of shame? It's
get rid
really
of
not
that
helping
stigma.
anyone.
No,
No,
the stigma is what prevents people from getting help, right?
right,
So, and we want people to get help because it's like,
right.
yeah.
Because they're brilliant. You are all uniformly brilliant women, like really some of the most brilliant women I know. And the help is what's made them able to continue to contribute in such significant ways. And so
Yeah.
it's like the only shame only helps the oppressors.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
who it
we
helps.
always talk about it now when it's too late, right? When people die by
Mm-hmm.
suicide, that's when they died of their mental health condition,
Right,
usually. Whether
right,
or not they were able to access help, if they did access help, it wasn't enough, right? They didn't get
right.
the intervention that they needed. And so, I feel like the only way we can prevent more people from
Yeah.
dying of mental health conditions, because it
Yes.
is life or death. We need to treat it like it's
Yes.
cancer, other terminal illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can access help. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And everyone deserves help. And
Yeah.
we need to get a better healthcare system, but
Yeah.
time so that help is more available and doesn't feel like it's, more for people who can pay for it. Because I do still feel like
There's,
self-conscious when I say like, oh, what about therapy? Because, not everyone can afford therapy
well, there's
and
so many.
everyone should be able to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. We need a systemic
Yeah.
reform to be able to have more access,
Yeah.
but it's like there's other reform that's needed, because it's like,
Yeah.
um, somebody with cancer, if they get
Yeah.
chemotherapy and they lose a bunch of weight, they lose hair, they lose their hair. That's usually not a reason people use to not get chemo and not get radiation.
Mm-hmm.
But like our society has made it so that people's appearances are so
Mm-hmm.
important that
Yes.
and we have under prioritized mental health as
Yes.
a valid illness and struggle, a chronic condition, so that their you know parents, everybody, like family who love you and support you, use aesthetics as reasons for not getting treatment,
Yeah.
and that's really a shame, right? I
It
wish
is.
I just want to challenge society to think about that differently. It's like we would never tell a person who is
Right.
with cancer to not get treatment because they might lose weight, because they might lose their hair. But why are we
Right.
doing that for people with mental health condition? Don't take meds because you might gain weight, because you might
Mm-hmm.
lose your hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just bootstrap it, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
With mental health,
Yeah. And
particularly.
also, yeah, I mean, while we're on the topic of like making sure we're making the right delineations, making sure that people delineate between people who are diagnosed and undiagnosed with mental health conditions, and like who are getting treatment and not getting treatment. Because it's like when somebody is in crisis, that can't be the only image we have of somebody who's living with bipolar disorder, right? Because there are
Agreed.
so many more people who are living in hiding, who are
Yeah.
who manage their conditions well, but they don't want to be stigmatized, so they keep
For
it
sure.
silent. You know, they keep
Mm-hmm.
it secret, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not fair. You know, and yeah, just so many misconceptions like that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It's yeah, I agreed on all points. Agree. So keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing, and I can't wait to see what you come out with in May because
Thank you.
that's Michelle's
Yeah.
month is May.
Yep. Yep.
So you'll have some great essays, I'm sure. And all my fingers and toes are crossed for you
Thank
out on
you.
submission, and that you get a great deal that respects you and you feel supported
Thank you.
and you get good publicity
Thank
and
you.
your book gets out there. There's so many steps
Yeah.
in writing a book
Yeah.
and then getting it into the world,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So may all of those steps be positive.
Thank
So,
you. I
um,
appreciate it.
thank you for joining me,
Thank you.
Michelle. It
Hugs.
was,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was such a pleasure. And thanks to everyone who joined us. And have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too. Take
Okay,
care.
bye.
Bye.